Welcome to Rates and Barrels, Thursday, August 29th. It's a live one. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, Trevor May. We're here against all odds. Technology conspiring against us, dead wasps, fire alarms, everything you can imagine that could make a live
Clear
show being
your
recorded from your
cache,
homes go
ladies and
wrong.
gentlemen. Clear
Yeah.
your cache.
Yeah, just set a little calendar reminder once in a while, clear your cache. Seems like it's a good thing to do if something's not working. So that's our tech tip of the day. But on this episode, we dig into Oneil Cruz's move from shortstop to center field. We'll talk about the broader implications for the Pirates as they try to take a bigger step forward in 2025, at least by wins. 2024 looks a lot like 2023, but of course, the arrival of Paul Skeens, among other things, making this team a bit more interesting. We're going to talk about the fast adjustments being made by the Jacksons, specifically Jackson Merrill and Jackson Chourio. How have they found success so quickly against big league pitching when a lot of other rookies have gone through prolonged stretches of struggles? We're going to take a look at swinging differently in different counts as well and try to dig into that. Get some questions as well in our Discord about Corbin Burnes and why he struggled in the second half. And we were wondering where have the K's gone for Corbin Burnes in recent years. So we'll try to unpack that. Plus a question about Logan Webb and the possibility that he develops a pitch that can help him generate more whiffs. So as you can tell, a jam-packed show lined up for us on this Thursday. We'll start at the top with the news. Oneil Cruz making the move to center field, which will probably be more starts at DH down the stretch before playing center field in 2025. It takes time to learn a new position, especially center field. Not as easy as it would seem to just move from the dirt to the outfield. There's a lot to unpack here. First, there's been some improvement with the bat this year. Overall, the quality of contact is as good as it's ever been. A 16.7% barrel rate, 54.7% hard hit rate. Cruz is striking out a bit less against lefties, striking out a little bit more against righties. So we're still seeing a 30% K rate from him. That's been a problem all along. Defensively, though, a -8 defensive runs saved, -3 outs above average at shortstop this year. The concern all along with Oneil Cruz has been he's 6'7". Like, list the 6'7" shortstops in baseball history. Go. I'll give you as much time as you want, right? There really aren't any. So you have this guy that is an incredible athlete, taller than usual for the position, great arm, 99th percentile in arm strength, 86th percentile in sprint speed. I think the possibility of this happening has existed for as long as Oneil Cruz has been in professional baseball, right? This is not a shocking development. It was more of a let's try him at shortstop and see if it works. And if it doesn't, we know he'll be a very good, if not a great outfielder down the road. Is that a fair assessment,
Well, yeah, I mean, we had in our last episode this really interesting piece, or on the Monday episode, we were talking about Rob Arthur's investigation into racial bias in the minor leagues. And I know like that this news came down like sort of right after that. And it's kind of hard to parse, like, oh, is this another instance of racial bias? I think you want to be careful being very specific about that sort of stuff. And then also, what we were talking about was the minor leagues and, black players being pushed to the outfield in the minor leagues. And I think the Pirates gave him a lot of chances. He played shortstop all the way through the minor leagues and he played into the major leagues and they gave him multiple tries in the major leagues. So it wasn't just like they looked at it and said, that was your one, you made an error, you're done. It was multiple errors. And I've been watching a fair amount of Pirates games and, some of them are just, I don't know, concentration or something like, they're plays he should have made. I think sometimes Ellie De La Cruz talks about this where, he can throw the ball so hard and he's so athletically superior that like sometimes he has to slow it down, but it's almost like what Trevor talks about with Jake DeGrom. Like he starts slowing it down and then you're not moving optimally. And now all of a sudden you're making errors because you're thinking slow it down, and like I think most athletes want to like do everything as hard as they can all the time because that's how you win. Like you're throwing the ball the hardest, so it's kind of weird to be like, I'm now going to place this ball to first base and now you're screwed up. So I think there was things that were starting to steamroll and started getting his head and it didn't look that good, frankly. And the numbers don't back it up. And I think this is the right move.
Yeah, I agree. I think it comes down to tools at the end of the day. Like guys who have really good arms and who can run are going to be given a shot in center field because tracking a ball in the outfield is something that is kind of assumed is more natural for or like a skill that can be learned easily. We were just talking on the radio right before this about Shohei Ohtani. Like, what if he didn't have to pitch? What would it look like if he was just what position would he play? And we're like, center field. Like, he's got a end of an arm and he runs like a deer. So like,
yeah,
like that guy's a center fielder. Like, there's no, could he play short? Probably, Shohei Ohtani, but he probably profiles as an outfielder because he can throw 100 miles an hour and he could throw that from the outfield. So
similar body too. He's really
big guy. When you're that tall and you're got to be close to the ground all the time, you got to field the ball, and then you got to, he's got the arm and all that stuff. He had everything, but it's just comes down to range is going to be limited. There's just other kind of body types are a little bit better suited to play that position. It's just that simple, I think. And but it also comes down to, like, he also profiles really well in that other position. So might as well give it a shot, especially if it's not when the numbers shake out. And, like you mentioned, he's been at short for, it wasn't like a month. He's got a couple of years. And now they feel like there's they have another option that they can play there that can do a good job. And so now they have the luxury of giving him a shot out there.
Yeah, and as Matan in the live stream points out, it might be routine plays that are the problem, right? You can't make a lot of mistakes on routine plays, and that seems to be the bigger problem for Cruz. Because of his arm, he can do extraordinary things. Because of his agility, he can get to balls that a lot of shortstops couldn't get to. But I think my point was the height was the concern when he was a prospect. People just thought, it might not work. He might just be too big. He might sort of never fit the position because of that. I don't know if that's a different type of bias entirely, where you say, oh, well, we can't put this guy here because it's just not going to work. To be too awkward. Maybe we'll see some great 6'7" shortstops someday. I think a lot of 6'7" players just end up in other sports. Like it's part of why it's such a small group of players to begin with.
A couple of things are interesting here. Matan talking about the routine play. It's like, are we going to get more out of Cruz when he's not as engaged? Because the center fielder sometimes is just hanging out, like may not get a ball for a while. Would shortstop have helped keep him more engaged, and would he have gotten better at routine plays over time? Like, would Tatis have gotten better at routine plays over time? Tatis had the problem with the routine play and was pretty good at the exemplary play. So I think these are interesting questions. And the other thing that Trevor said that stuck out for me was center field is actually a little bit easier than the corners in a certain regard. When you're behind the pitcher, you can see not only the movement of the pitch. Sometimes Kiermaier says he can see the catcher signs, which I guess is out the window now. But you can see the movement of the pitch going in, and then you can see the movement of the ball coming out. Like, you can't actually see slice as well from the corners. Like the way the ball is moving horizontally, you can't see that as well from the corners. But in center, you can see that ball moving. And so I know it's a more difficult position in terms of tools and what ground you have to cover, but there are some things that make center field easier than the corners.
I do remember when Aaron Judge moved out of the corner into center. I think people kind of laughed at that. They thought maybe it would make him more susceptible to injury, or for one reason or another, maybe it wouldn't be a smooth transition. I think he plays that position a lot better than most of the skeptics expected at the time, right? He might actually stay there a little bit longer just based on other personnel they have available. I think that's the other wild card here. I think as far as what Cruz has done as a hitter, you can look at what he's done this year. He's got up to a 117 WRC plus. You think about him being completely healthy for a full season, which was not the case a year ago. One more step next year is possible. I think it comes down to slightly better swing decisions, which come with experience a lot of times. He can live with a high strikeout rate because he does so much damage. So you could project another step forward, I think, from Cruz as a hitter. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation at all. So what do you think the ceiling looks like, and how close do you think we are to that ceiling for Oneil Cruz as a hitter, Trevor?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, just judging based on his improvement since he's come up, he has made incremental improvements over time the whole time. So that tells me that we haven't hit the limit yet. It's not like he's out of his mind with the season. He's having a good season, and it's the best one he's had. But it's Is there potential in there still? Yes, because he has that kind of power. That if you just he's a guy who can hit 15 home runs in a month if he gets super hot. That's possible, and he hasn't done that yet. So I would love to see him have 2 of those months where he goes off and he has a truly special season. I think that is entirely possible. He's a left-handed stick. He's got when it comes down to like that kind of strength and that kind of power, and it's a strikeout rate situation, usually you're cutting that strikeout rate by 2%, 3% can make all the difference in the world. Like look at like Brent Rooker and how he's changed his. He still strikes out a lot, but he's dropped it by about 2.5%, and we've seen his OPS consistently be 100 points higher because he has that kind of power. So like those, when it's that little of adjustment, I don't want to say it's a little adjustment, but when it's one little thing clicking, turning him from a good high quality hitter to a great hitter for a certain amount of time, I think he has that potential that maybe other guys don't have.
Yeah, I think he could do like a 275 30-30 season or something.
Yeah, still has that in there. Still a guy we're excited about from a fantasy perspective. Still a guy Pirates fans should be really excited about, even with the shift to center field. Brock Tua weighing in on the live stream. Sell the team, directed at Bob Nutting, who I don't think is a fan of Rates and Barrels, but hey, you never know. Bob, if you're out there listening, drop us a note, especially if you're in the live hive. We'd love to hear from you. What do the Pirates do at shortstop, though? I think the interesting thing about the timing of announcing this decision is there's still runway for this year where they could have let Cruz have another month if they wanted to. They didn't go that route. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, great defender, doesn't seem like a long-term solution. Maybe he's the stopgap until you
Under
find that franchise shortstop. Yeah, so like you have your safety glove first option there. What's next for the Pirates, both at shortstop and for other parts of this roster? If they're going to really turn the corner next year and be a contender, at least for an NL wild card, if not for the NL Central, aside from shortstop, what has to change?
They need to figure out that infield. I mean, there's a story to be told where Brian Hayes is healthy next year, has back surgery or figures the back thing out. Between Henry Davis, Joey Bart, and Andy Rodriguez, they have a good catching tandem. Nick Gonzalez plays short. Kiner-Falefa backs up. I'm telling the like everything comes together story. Okay. Nick York is an above average regular at second, and they go out, and if not Rowdy Tellez, then they go out and maybe you can actually afford to buy in free agency first baseman sometimes, like an old first baseman. Like what if Paul Goldschmidt, isn't he free agent?
Yeah. Why? No, don't shop in that bin. Like try to move up one bin. I
don't know, Paul Goldschmidt. Like, what if you had a resurgence season with the Pirates? Then you have this and then you add together the fact that their starting rotation is going to be really good. Their outfield is going to be really good, I think. And you just need David Bednar to figure things out and find a reliever or two. I mean, but I did tell the story of everything coming together. And what is the likelihood that each of those things I just said happened is 1%. Especially the Paul Goldschmidt part, probably.
I mean, that might be the most likely thing of all the things described. I think because it might be a year for $6 million, kind of like the old Carlos Santana deal or something along those lines. No.
You know what Carlos Santana is? This is a little bit of trivia. You know what he is? He's the only person in baseball over 35 that's going to be an above average regular on the hitting side.
Hey,
he's Angel Squander, man. 300 plus. Yeah, he's got over 1,000 of everything, over 300 home runs. We don't talk about that guy enough.
He's pretty amazing. But also, it reminds me of what Joey Votto said in his retirement speech, whereas in one of his retirement things, he said, "It's a young man's game. I am not a young man anymore."
It changes quickly. The other thing that's interesting, just as a kind of a flyaway idea, Termarr Johnson moved up to Double-A. He's been playing some shortstop this year, kind of splitting his time between second base and shortstop. So I guess you can't really rule out the possibility that if there's some growth there over the course of the winter and into next season, then maybe Johnson ends up being the next longer term option that gets a look at the position if they go stopgap route.
His batting averages are not good, but by WRC plus, he's been really, really solid. And he's got to be getting closer, right? He's in Double-A now. I mean, that's
got there.
That's what the thing is. I think that next year they have to go between they have to do this quickly too. Go from sorting between the options to these are the options. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so between Nick York, Nick Gonzalez, and Tamar Johnson, they need to find like a good second baseman and maybe even a shortstop.
It might be a combo of veteran and free agency, big trade where you trade some of your young pitching for a young infielder.
They do have
And
Bubba
then
Chandler and Thomas Harrington, so they might have like a pitching prospect to trade.
right, and then finding the third guy might be as much as you can put on the group of non-prospects that they're trying to shuffle through right now. But I think you could see it. You can at least tell yourself the story that 80 wins plus are a possibility in Pittsburgh with the right adjustment. Still a nice long-term up arrow there, even though this year might be flat from a win total perspective. Let's move on to the Jacksons. We're going to talk about some young hitters who've made some really quick adjustments over the course of this year. And Jackson Merrill and Jackson Chourio have both done that. I mean, if you look at what these guys are doing right now, go back to basically May 1st forward, throw out their first month. And in the case of Jackson Merrill, the first month wasn't bad. You're going to see top 30, top 40 production from both of these players. They're doing it with very little experience at AAA. Merrill's doing it while learning a new position, which I think makes it even more impressive. But let's start with Jackson Merrill. When you start to look at what he was in day one as a big leaguer and what he's starting to show us throughout the second half of this season, especially, what's changed the most?
Yeah, I have these heat maps here for Jackson Merrill, which kind of show that, on the left is his isolated slugging. So it's slugging heat map for early in the season. And this is when he was a contact guy that didn't have that much power. Very oppo. When I see that, I see a guy who has kind of a scoopy swing. He can hit the low pitch and he can kind of inside out the pitch on the outer half. And that matches up with my eye test. Now you look on the right and he's figured something out in terms of pulling the ball, hitting the ball, middle in. And I had a stat, I think, for you that was, for March, April, and May, he did not have a single double or homer that was middle in. And since then, he has 16. So he is a guy whose strength is oppo. Who has added the ability to pull or go center, but do something on the inner half. There's something there where I see that first heat map and I say, you know what? Do I really think this guy will never slug middle? And then you fill in middle and you get that second heat map. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
You see that first one, it's actually kind of hopeful to me. It's like, if you can do two things, why not add middle to that? And that's going to be a theme for me with the two Jacksons that have really broken out.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Trevor? If you see that when you're kind of looking at a young player or any player and you see that gap between two spaces where they handle pitches really well, do you start to assume that the space in between will become a dangerous spot to pitch them?
Possibly, or it might be an example of being in between some pitches. So he's hitting a type of pitch one place and hitting a type of pitch in the other place. And also that's pretty indicative, like you mentioned, the scoop swing. If you're looking at these, that you can tell the angle, like look at the angle of the red. The angle of the red on the left is steeper than it is on the right. So it looked like he has maybe made a slight change, or maybe it could be a mindset thing, and that has flattened his ability to flatten his swing out a little bit more and still get to that pitch down and away has been the key. But I went and looked at his heat map, and especially like his expected numbers in WOBA and slugging and ISO, and he handles like the middle pillar. I've been calling it the middle pillar of the zone, the stuff that's in the center and not on the edges. Those would be considered mistakes. But if you can hit them all the way down and all the way up, that's usually a pretty good example of your ability to take advantage of mistakes that most guys make. So they have to stay on the edges. Once you have to stay on the edges, you become harder and harder to pitch you. This is something like Jose Altuve has done so well in his career, is he's hit really well, really high, and really well, really low over the plate. Now, and not chasing off or in too much is when he's going the best. Right now, he's chasing off and in too much. But when he wasn't, that is when he was the best version of himself. And Jackson Merrill seems to have made that adjustment. Like, the east and west is not something he's having an issue. He's not chasing those ways. He's just chasing within that pillar that he hits hard. So like when he's making a decision to swing, he's making a decision to swing at something that he knows he can handle a little bit better. And that is something that's changed over time. And that's what that tells me. So if that's the case, then I'll be like, okay, now let's try to approach him in a way that where the pitches we're choosing are always moving away from the middle of the plate. Because, you know, if you're trying to backdoor something, guys who try to backdoor come off the plate, on the plate and stuff are probably guys he is abusing at this point. It's the guys that where you can get the edges that are moving from the middle of the plate into the edges that are probably having better success. Now I can't verify that, but that usually does happen that way. So that's what it tells me. And to be honest, the next guy we're talking about, Chourio, has also made a similar type of adjustment, not quite as well as Merrill has, but he is definitely starting to hit that middle pillar well as well.
Yeah, and check out his heat maps. Like he has two spots. It's not quite the scoopy swing. It looks like, you know, he was able to hit high, and middle in, and then he just sort of filled in the gaps a little bit. And to some extent, I wonder how much anticipation has to do with this. To me, if I see two strengths, I see two swings, right?
Yeah.
And at least, or two approaches or two sort of tweaks he can make. So on the left, he can block that high pitch, and maybe that's like going oppo or sort of center oppo, you know, in the air. And then on the left, it's maybe sort of you know, pulling that one for power. Like I see two areas of strength. I think maybe he has two swings. And when I look on the right, you know, which is Chourio since June 1st, or maybe it's May, I forget exactly. It says at the top there.
That one's actually June. The Merrill one was May, but this Chourio one's June.
But you look at the right, he kind of filled in the gaps. And so I wonder if it's more like he already had the tools in order to like do what he did on the right, but he just needed to see how pitchers were going to pitch him. And now on the right, he's putting the right swing on each pitch each time. He's just sort of filling in. But again, what you see is not amazing middle out before, and now he's better middle. So like I just don't think you become a hot prospect, a top prospect, and you aren't good middle. You know, middle often is a place where you can see someone's career is near an end. They start not being able to handle middle. But if a guy comes up and has two strengths and middle isn't filled in yet, I'm into it.
Yeah, you're willing to bet on that. And just thinking about Chourio, I knew more about Chourio before he debuted than Merrill, just because being a Brewers fan, following more people on Brewers Twitter, I remember a lot of clips from last season from Kurt Hogue, the Brewers writer at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, of Chourio home runs off fastballs that were high in the zone, like either at the top of the zone or above. And I know we've talked
that one
about
heat map spot up there.
Yeah, the zone is different, but even some of them were like high 90s fastballs at Double A. The occasions that he would get those, he was still driving those pitches out. And that to me gave me some confidence of like, okay, he's got plenty of bat speed. So unless there's a low problem where stuff down in the dirt, you know, below the zone.
And then he comes up and he has a low heat map too, like a strength low. You're like, okay, he's got two spots. I don't know. This is all in opposition to Jackson Holliday, which I was surprised, but Jackson Holliday only has one strength, middle in, and they've been filling up the outside part of the corner. He has one hit on pitches outside, like low and outside, and it was a pulled changeup. That's his only hit on the pitches on the outside part of the plate.
So from a game planning perspective, right, that area just gets filled up. Yeah, you're going to get filled up there until you show you can do something with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be more afraid if he filleted that into the outfield, because I'd be like,
if you slapped it down the left field line, you know.
Now he's adding the Jackson Merrill, right? Like he started with the other part, and now he's going to add the Jackson Merrill. I'm going to scoop this into left field, but I don't know if he has that ability.
He might not yet, but he's a kid.
Right, so, that's true.
And his bat ball skills, so far in the minors, has been very, very good. So it's like he doesn't strike out a ton. He walks as much as he strikes out. Those are good approach. He's got the head on his shoulders to have a good approach. So it's only a matter of time before I think he starts to figure that type of stuff out. But again, it comes down to like, what's he trying to do? Still trying to juice things, still trying to be a power bat, which he doesn't necessarily need to be yet. I think it comes down to maybe intent a little bit with him. And there was so much pressure and hype, and especially with the way their team is and stuff. There's just a lot of like noise that once it settles, and we've seen it settle a little bit after the first stint, and he's had some success. Yeah, he's had those same low peaks or the same valleys in the roller coaster, but like he's coming back up a little bit more as opposed to just staying there. But yeah, him picking it up right away, I think maybe he had the highest expectation out of all of them, and who his dad is, and there's just a lot going on there. So when that stuff kind of settles down, I would be more, I think, willing to come like kind of put a stamp on the type of guy he is. But I think you're right, though, showing the ability to kind of take that pitch away and just take your single away. It doesn't seem like it's something that he's willing to do yet. But I'm still hopeful that he will.
Maybe I'm assuming he can't. It's more
Yeah.
maybe willing. I could see the approach thing. But as a pitcher, if you're facing a guy that has sort of multiple, bright red spots on the heat map, that's scarier, right? Because it also just means fewer places you can put the ball, right?
Yeah, and he doesn't just have a swing type that is bad against a certain pitch. You can just keep going to the well if you need to, because it doesn't matter if he knows it's coming. He can't change the way he's swinging to do it. And those guys exist as well. And some of those guys have success because they only hit the pitch that's a mistake every time, like Adam Duvall or Hunter Renfroe are kind of like a couple of those
They're
guys.
just waiting for the mistake. Yeah.
Throw that fastball down away. I'll never hit it. But if you throw a slider and it goes right down the middle, I'm going to crush it, and I'm never going to not crush it. That's going to keep me in the big leagues. So, but he's not going to be one of those guys. I do think, and you know what? To be honest, maybe intent or like willingness and ability are connected, and he's like not willing to yet because he can't do it yet. So like trying to do it isn't going to make him better yet. But I think that just based on how he showed how he can handle the bat and has bat to ball skills just kind of naturally up until this point, that it's completely within the realm of possibility. He figures it out quickly.
Yeah, and we've already seen since he's returned, it's been like 26 games since he had that first stint, 5 homers, K rates under 30%. It's trending in the right direction. It just might not happen overnight because it usually doesn't. And even in the case of Chourio, he looks so much different from June on than he did in those first 2 months. But that's to be expected for these guys, especially the guys that come through the minors as quickly as this entire trio has to this point. And I think there are people that are getting frustrated even with Wyatt Langford. And Langford played college ball and was supposed to be a little bit more polished. But I think the injury that Langford had earlier this year also explains a lot about why he hasn't quite hit the ground running the way people were expecting back in March. I think there's tons of reasons to still be excited about a lot of guys in this rookie class, even if they haven't clicked quite as quickly as Merrill and Chourio have.
Yeah. I think you're right also to point out the excellent swinging strike rates that he had in the minor leagues. I just did a quick little thing where I look at, AA players under the age of 21 since 2021 with excellent swinging strike rates and power in the minor leagues. And you've got a really short list. I mean, without power, you've got Bryce Turang, Xavier Edwards, Mason Wynn. With power, you got Roman Anthony Volpe, Tristan Casas. So there's a lot to say with just he's demonstrated the ability in the past, and just needs to kind of figure it out at the big league level.
And Holliday will by far be the least costly of the 3 Jacksons when you're looking at your 2025 drafts. No matter what happens in the final month, there will be a gap between Merrill and Chourio and wherever Holliday is going. It might be a large gap, too, depending on how things play out the rest of the way. We had one more talk that Eno saw at the Sabre seminar last weekend that we wanted to dig into, and it's about if it's good to modulate your swing by count. And this one had a fantastic visual too. So, tell us a little bit more about this presentation and walk us through some of the different things that we see on this particular visual.
He did this is from Scott Powers, who is a professor that used to work for the Dodgers, used to run their analytics department. And if you look at the x-axis, it's how much the batter reduces their swing length by count. And then if you look at the y-axis, it's how much they reduce their bat speed by count. If you look at the shape of the graph, you notice most people in the major leagues do reduce their swing length and swing speed in 2 strike counts. I have another thing from Josh Rodriguez, who's at Coach Rodriguez 2. This shows how much people reduce their bat speed. Look at that. In 3-0 counts, the major league average bat speed is 74 miles an hour. In 0-2 counts, it's 67 miles an hour. So that's a huge difference. And so back to the powers graph, what you see is in the red, those are players who are performing better in 2 strike counts. And so you can kind of assume to some extent that the changes that they make are beneficial. And so Julio Rodriguez is really one of the best case scenarios there. He reduces his swing length a fair amount in 2 strike counts, or as the strike goes, as the count gets deeper. He does not reduce his bat speed much. And then you have Adley Rutschman, who's in the blue, who has cost himself by reducing his bat speed a lot, but not reducing his swing length. And I guess that makes sense. You wouldn't want to have a long swing that's slower, in 2 strike counts. And part of my reasoning is, and this is where I really wanted to get Trevor in on it, is in 2 strike counts, the league throws 43% fastballs. In 1 strike counts, it throws 45% fastballs. So in the modern day baseball, I don't think you're expecting that different of a pitch mix in 2 strike counts, largely because pitchers know you're reducing your swing length, you're reducing your bat speed. I'm going to throw you a fastball. So if you are Nico Horner or Anthony Rizzo, who reduce their swing length and bat speed a ton, I feel like I would be likely to throw you a high four-seam fastball in 2 strike counts. And I wonder how I know that Trevor watches a lot of Julio Rodriguez, and I just wonder what he would think as a pitcher if he saw, an Adley Rutschman step to the plate or in 2 strikes, or Julio Rodriguez in 2 strikes. Wouldn't that affect the way you pitch them as well?
Yeah, actually, it's funny that I kind of just had a realization while we were starting that conversation, and then you hit it. And so the interesting thing with like Adley Rutschman, I would, if his swings gets or is slower, but is the same length fastball, like he's now going to take more time for the barrel to get where it needs to get to hit the fastball hard. Julio Rodriguez, on the other hand, when he shortens his swing, and then it's the same speed, his barrel's going to get there faster. So breaking ball, just throw a breaking ball, which I've watched a lot of Julio. That works really well. The reason, and then also on top of that, the fastball is generally hit harder more often and can turn into higher production / homers. And to get run value, hitting a bunch of homers on a pitch, that's a great way to get that run value up on that pitch. And which he's hitting two strike fastballs, Julio is, but like when he gets the breaking
also
ball,
strike out a lot.
He's striking out a lot on stuff that's not that pitch. And so that's the trade-off. But like you would still take that because every once in a while he's getting it, as opposed to Adley, who's not really putting himself in position to hit either pitch well. Maybe a changeup, but even sliders. If your bat speed's long still and slow, you still can't get your barrel to match the movement of the slider. So he's probably still not hitting the slider hard either. It's probably just changeups, which don't profile as a great pitch to him anyways. So less guys are throwing them, and relievers don't even throw them at all, basically. So it's like, he's not putting himself in a position to hit a pitch he's going to see a lot either. So that's probably the biggest difference, but that's how I would use it. The thing with like Nico Horner or Rizzo, and I think honestly Rizzo's thing is just kind of coming with him aging a lot. But that kind of keeps both of them open, and you can basically just say either way, I can do this either way because it's just generally slower. And that's how I would use that. So like I'm not worried about heavy damage to those two guys later in a count because of the way they're going. Julio, I'm still kind of weary of throwing that fastball, and but selling out, like Adley's kind of doing an old school way of approaching it, and I don't think he needs to. And I think you're right there.
There is a good question from Jump Shoot in the live hive. Does Adley being a switch hitter matter? I know we've seen with some of the early swing data, switch hitters do have pretty different swing speeds sometimes from the left and right side.
His stats, by the way, his OPSs from the sides have completely flipped from his rookie year. Like crazy, actually, how much more damage he's doing from the right side this year. as opposed to the left side, and then vice versa when he first came up, with much better OPS wise from.
I think it's just really. I think it's just really hard to be a switch hitter, right? Like you've got two swings. I mean, imagine being a switch pitcher. You have to maintain two whole deliveries. It's like just mechanically. I think that maybe, and he's also one of the youngest names in terms of like smallest sample on this list. So it's like maybe this is just a part of him figuring it out. But I can see over his career, the pitch that he hits the best with 2 strikes is the curveball. And that actually sort of makes sense. If your swing is still long but slow, that's the one that you're going to actually be able to hit the best.
That makes sense.
How many people are throwing 2-strike curveballs to Adley Rutschman, though? I mean, like some people, that's their best pitch, but I'd be going fastball slider against them.
So the give and take here, thinking about it, just what a hitter's trying to do is avoiding the strikeout, right? But to the extent that you slow down and shorten up your swing, like you can overcorrect and get to the point where you're not doing damage anymore, right? Then I didn't strike out, but the best case scenario was a sac fly, a softly hit ball in play, maybe a productive out. But
now we're getting to the meat of it. I mean, because there's all the people that are yelling, there is no 2-strike approach in the big leagues, and I just showed you that they modulate their swing, their swing speed, and in fact, I hate to be a hot taker and I hate to fight that battle because it's ongoing. You'll never win it. I would say that maybe the problem is the 2-strike approach. I would say you might get you're not going to get a lot of fastballs. You might get a fastball on any count. Like you need to be able to modulate that. And it needs to, you can't be swinging 7 miles an hour slower in 2-strike counts. Like, I'm sorry. I just don't think that's a good approach.
Well, it's almost like the 2-strike approach is too vague. Like who's pitching? What do they do? What are their strengths? Like you would handle a 2-strike situation differently based on how you expect to be pitched by whoever you're facing too, right?
And the team you're facing, I mean, scouting reports, were there teams that you were on that were a little bit more into 2-strike fastballs than other teams?
Oh yeah. Like that was a big thing with the Twins when we first started to everyone throw the sliders. We were like kind of going backwards. We're trying to get the fastballs. We had the guys with the type of fastballs that could get the swing and miss late too. But the high fastball was it still is a very high whiff pitch. It's just higher, high risk, high reward. So, it really does matter about that stuff. I think that a lot of the gripes about the no two strike, just to kind of go back to that, the no 2-strike approach comes down to like, Chipper Jones brought this up the other day. It's like the 2-strike approach in that like you're okay grounding out to second in order to get the guy home from third. That has gone like where that's the intent. Guys are like thinking if I get out here, I would like actually to get out here because I don't have a chance. Like that
might be gone. Modern baseball does not want to give up outs. Like we're just like outs are your currency. Don't give up an out.
I don't think that at all. That's not even going into their head that that's possible, which is good and has its merit and doesn't. It just depends on you choosing your spots. But you can't just go to I'm going to slow my swing down so I don't strike out with 2 strikes because, like in Adley's case, for example, Gunner's on first or whatever. Now it's a double play, and now a strikeout would have been a better option. Right? And he doesn't run super well either. So like that's something you have to think about. And when you slow your swing down that much, the chances that you ground softly into a double play are high. So like it's situational. I know it's baseball and we say that a lot. It's almost always situational, but overall, maybe picking those spots less, but having the ability to do them and just like filleting a ball if you need to fillet it every once in a while is, I think, still valuable. But a guy like Julio, like maybe it's just not in the cards for him because slowing down, like we talked about Oneil Cruz, slowing down his bat makes him, it changes it some way that makes it like not a viable swing anymore.
Might still miss just as much.
Yeah, might be missing such much. You don't know how many guys are that's the effect as well. But it's an interesting thing. I just you gotta have to take it case by case.
Yeah, I just love Yandy Diaz on here. He doesn't shorten up, he doesn't slow down. He just rips it every single time, but he doesn't strike out that much, so it kind of works for him.
I'd also say this question from Frederick Weaver from the Live Hive: is the lower swing length on 2-strike counts evidence of a deeper contact point and opposite field approach being ideal? This is another reason why I don't love being a hot taker, and I don't want to say that people are doing the wrong thing, because our information is still a little bit incomplete. And what we might find is, as we study this better and as we add contact point to our swing length and swing speed discussion, we discover that some people are modulating their contact point and are going to oppo and covering more of the bag and doing what old schoolers want them to do. And some people are just slowing down. So there is a difference because, contact point changes the measurement. And so, if you don't have as much, if your bat doesn't get it out in front and you don't have as far to go, then you're not going to get the same bat speed measurement, and you're going to have a shorter swing. But I think that you're seeing a little bit of that on the graph, where you're seeing that people who reduce their swing length but not their swing speed do the best. That's, I think, one way to read this graph. And so if you reduce your swing length and not your swing speed, what you're doing is, I'm swinging just as fast, but I'm letting the ball travel. I'm gonna wait on this one. I'm gonna watch it a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And that might increase your contact rate, which is what you kind of want in 2 strike counts.
In general, interesting thing about that question. Yeah, to answer, like, to kind of touch on a point he made, generally, if you hit the ball deeper and like if it's before you break your hands, because you got to remember, hand break time also changes where the barrel is in skill. But hand breaking is for most guys where you turn your hands over. That's where you're peaked in your bat speed. That's where it's going the fastest. Usually, that's what you want. So you want to hit the ball when that happens, when it's at its fastest speed. If you're hitting it before you break your hands, you're not going to have as much power because the bat's not up to speed yet. So, like in the case of Adley, he might be hitting the ball deeper into the zone as well before the hands have broken to get the speed up as well. So, like, and then once you hit it, like, there's no reason to speed up anymore. So, like, that's a problem too. So you want to give yourself a chance of continuing, no matter where the pitch is and what it is, by shortening the swing up and keeping the speed up. You're giving yourself the best chance to get the barrel out in front every time still. So you're still going to hit the ball hard, and it's still going to be, you're going to be hitting it at the peak speed if it's a shorter swing. So, like, that's why shorter swing as opposed to slower bat is the better option, because you're giving your chance to get the barrel to a place where it can still hit the ball hard. I think that's at the end of the day. So, like, dragging the bat through is not a good intent anymore. It's more like you want to keep the barrel in. They call it like keeping the bat in the zone longer. It's not technically real in the way that's said. It's like pitching to contact. It's not like real. No one's like, hit this. Like, but it is in reality, like, it's in position longer. It's in the right position longer, not necessarily in the zone, but just in position longer if you do it the way Julio does it versus freshman.
Is the answer right in the middle of the graph with Juan Soto? I mean, like, if you're going to mimic anyone as a hitter, Juan Soto seems like a pretty good choice, because there's a slight shortening up, there's a slight drop in speed, but kind of just happy medium. Does that actually kind of fit as what you think would be ideal, Trevor?
That might just be something natural for him. And that's what tells me. The way that it's so little and minute is rare. And it almost sounds like it's not conscious, like it's something he just does. And so I think like with Julio, that's very clearly an intent thing. He's like, I do that. I shorten now. I think Juan may just kind of shorten it up a little bit naturally as the AB goes on. It gets longer because he knows he can still hit the ball hard, and he keeps it within those ranges. And that's really hard to do. I think doing what Jose does is actually really hard to do with intent and with practice, and a lot of that is intuitive. There's a lot of guys there, but again, the same thing could be guys are just going off intuition and not really having the approach as well, and you would see the same thing, but he has the approach and that intuition, and that's what makes him the hitter he is.
Yeah, kind of just unconscious feel for hitting. That seems to be just a elite, historically great sort of level for Juan Soto. Well, let's move on. I'm not sure what happened to Eno. Given the tech issues he was having before, I'm not even certain he's coming back at this point. We had some great questions in our Discord. One of them came from Stinky. Stinky wanted to know if there's anything different about Corbin Burnes since the All-Star break. We just saw a start from Burnes against the Dodgers on Wednesday night. Shohei Ohtani took him deep, like pulled a ball. It was outside that it was kind of defied physics for me watching that home run. But have you seen anything, Trevor, with Corbin Burnes in the second half of this season that's notably different in terms of stuff, velo, movement, anything that would lead you to be able to explain why Burnes hasn't been his usual self in these last 7 or 8 starts.
One thing that's interesting is there really isn't a ton, I think, in terms of like movement. Like everything's about the same. He's still throwing really hard. He's not lost any movement on any pitches. Maybe a slight, slight changes at times because it's late in the year and there's fatigue, and he's thrown 164 innings. Like that's a lot of innings. But it is odd. His decision making slightly different, and he's throwing. It looks like he's going to pitches that are hit a little bit harder, not hit harder, hit more often, not swing and miss pitches as much. He's thrown more changeups this year. He's got 11% changeup rate. His sinker usage is I don't want to say it's up, but I feel like he's used it a little bit more. He's trying to use it into the righties and get the ground balls, kind of maybe go for a double play a little bit more often. And something we haven't seen him do in the past. He wanted to strike out double digits, right? And it could be a function of the nature of how their starting rotation is put together right now, and that he's being asked to do a lot. Right? He's like, we need you to go throw 7 because our bullpen, we can't use everybody every single game. We need a guy that eats a bunch of innings, and he could be taking that to heart. I know he is a guy who cares about eating innings. And that little adjustment could point to him not missing bats as much, making decisions where he's not worried about missing bats as much because he needs to go deeper into games, which is hurting him because when he tries to miss bats, he gets those things. But I just think it might be a little bit more bad timing, and these things are he's just not having, he hasn't had a couple great outings in a row, and it just happens to be at a time where they need him to, and we're just noticing a lot. I tend to lean that way a little bit more because I haven't been able to find a ton, but we got Eno back, and he usually has some great stuff. I'm glad, because I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, you're right. There's nothing that I can't find a smoking gun when I look at the movement of the pitches, or like it looks like it's all there. I did watch last night, and my general theory, and one of the question was, we have another question coming up later, but with Corbin Burnes, I think my general theory is like just the league sort of knowing him better. So he goes up against Teoscar Hernandez, and he throws curveball, sinker, which was a ball, and Teoscar didn't even blink at it. Curveball, which now Teoscar has fouled off. There's no way I would have gone back to a curveball. He does a slider, which Teoscar fouls off, and then he puts a curveball back where the last one was fouled off, exactly in the same spot, and Teoscar goes yakety yak. And I just feel like, what is this approach in this moment here? Because in the next at bat, Corbin Burnes goes up against Teoscar Hernandez. It's all cutters and sliders, and he strikes Teoscar out in like 4 pitches. Why didn't you take the cutter slider at bat and this 75% curveball at bat and put them together? This feels like there was like a plan. This is what we're going to do against Teoscar the first time. This is what we're going to do against Teoscar the second time. This is what we're going to do that Teoscar the third time. And to some extent, like, if you're Teoscar in this, you start sitting curveball.
Yeah.
He just showed you 3 curveballs out of 4 pitches. Like, you're sitting curveball. And he sat curveball, and he hit it out. And I'm not here to say that, like, Orioles game planning is bad. But that one just struck me as like, what are you doing? And one thing that he did do when he got to the Orioles is throw his curveball more. And his curveball's good, and it's led to a little early uptick in strikeouts. But I think one of my weirdest theories is that I think batters and pitchers should be random number generators. And they should just be as weird as possible and just never get into any patterns. If you look, Corbin Burnes, when he's behind, goes to the cutter 60% of the time. So he has some 60s on his chart that you're going to circle. And once you, like, I think Trevor's talking about this, once you get past 60, like, people are circling that and thinking about it.
They know.
Yeah.
I did find actually something interesting, I think, with the difference between his slider and his curveball. So he's thrown the slider more than he's ever thrown a slider. But I'm looking at where it is the vast majority of them have been thrown. not a lot in the strike zone. I think he's just more comfortable throwing curveball for strikes than he is throwing
He
sliders.
can't. That was my question: is why does his slider does well by stuff plus? That would lead to more strikeouts.
Yeah.
He is down a little bit in strikeouts. Why doesn't he throw the slider more? There's. I thought maybe he was blending between the cutter and the slider. Maybe they're too close, or maybe he just can't command it. Maybe he's just not. He doesn't command his slider great.
I thought the blending might be possible just because he throws the cutter so much. It's such an important pitch for him that maybe that's part of why that slider doesn't click for him.
You know,
well, the velocities are different enough that it's hard to blend because his cutter's 96 and his slider's 88, right? So that difference in velo is enough. The interesting thing is, here's the whiff rate. Curveball's whiff rate is 38%, but the slider's is 45.6. So like,
but he just doesn't get in the zone, so he doesn't get swings.
So I really think he's just that's the difference at the end of the day. Like, I bet you they're like, hey man, the slider's probably the way. Even though the curveball's really good, we want you to throw them about the same amount of time, and just kind of mess with them. But he's just like, my slider's a ball all the time, so he just hurt the curveball, and which is hurting him a little more. Which curveballs are hit harder than sliders right now in the game,
especially if, like, I think in the game of anticipation, if it, like a curveball, you know, if I don't anticipate it, a lot of times I just don't swing.
Yeah,
you know, then you stole a strike from me.
Yeah.
But if I do anticipate a curveball, I can hit it.
Yeah, you got time to get the barrel out there, and if a slider, you're like, oh, I don't know what this is. It's 90.
Right.
Like, there's no like, and you just foul it off. It's too hard. Like,
that's why this has become a slider league. It's like, you know, even
yeah. So he's just not leaning on the pitch that will get him the most, I think, effect, because it's not throwing for strikes, and that's big for him. Like, commanding a pitch is huge. He's not going to throw it if he can't, and that is by far his worst commanded pitch.
Yeah. Being a workhorse is great as far as getting paid in free agency, having the track record that Burnes has. He's going to get a massive deal this winter. But if you start yielding more contact, either because you're trying to pitch deeper into games or you become predictable, whatever the reason is, it seems like a very bad thing in a walk year. And when you look at a guy that's gone from 30.5% with the K rate in 2022 down to 25.5% last year in his final year with the Brewers, down to 22.3%. You look at the swinging strike rates the last two seasons being in that 12% range. I don't think we're going back to 30% strikeout rate Corbin Burnes in the future. Like, I don't know if what's happening this year is necessarily the true talent new baseline, but if you want the elite strikeout rate, I think it's going to take a pretty big adjustment for that to come back. And I wonder if that's going to give any teams some hesitation in going out and giving him, a 6-7 year massive deal that he's certainly going to get this winter.
If my team was about to sign him to a big deal like that, I'd be like, okay, let's all talk about the slider now. Because I just feel like, in this type of league, I want the guy I'm giving millions and millions of dollars to have a great slider.
Yeah.
And do you believe it's going to get better?
That was the more one thing with Yamamoto, dude.
Yeah.
You didn't have the great slider, but I think they must have seen enough in the cutter, the gyro, whatever that he was throwing, and said, we can work with this.
Yeah.
They had a good question from Michael C. in the Discord, wondering if there could be a true whiff pitch for Logan Webb, right? I mean, Logan Webb, like Corbin Burnes, has had a lot of success for several years, but it seems like he's doing it with a lot of the same tools that he's always had. I think the only thing that's kind of caught my attention in the last year or so when we brought up Logan Webb is that I think you said, his release point's been changing, right? It's been dropping a little bit over time, but overall, it's a lot of the same approach and pitch mix that Logan Webb is using to get the results that he gets. So are there similarities here, even though they're very different as pitchers in terms of the stuff that they're working with?
Yeah, the through line that I was going to try and draw, which is really, really hard to prove and has to do with sort of this idea of decay. The more you throw a pitch, the more people see it, the worse it gets, right? Is just that there's a certain amount of decay that happens for any pitcher that's been in the league for a while. I mean, people now know what you throw. And that's why, I think one of the reasons I admire Greinke so much was I felt like he was a real tinkerer that would be like, oh, you think you know me, this year I'm different, and there was that kind of like every year, like I felt like he wanted to come into spring training every year with something else, and the one thing I have, so and I'm not saying that these guys don't want to do that. Corbin is throwing the curve more this year. He is trying to change a little bit. Webb, I don't know if people know this. Webb throws a cutter. He has mostly thrown it to one player, Shohei Ohtani. Is this Webb? Weaver?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I hadn't seen it everywhere, but like, yeah, I talked to Logan Webb about a lot about his cutter. It's not great. He's trying to figure it out. It could theoretically be good. There are a lot of guys who are cutter, sinker, changeup guys, you know. I don't know. The sweeper that Webb throws, the baby sweeper that he throws right now, is a decent pitch, but it's not. I don't know why. Maybe people can see the release point so different from his other ones, or he's tried a harder slider, he's tried a slower slider. There's something about his mechanics, I think, that will never make him have a really great breaking ball. And in essence, I guess the other through line between these two pitchers is neither one of them has a standout slider.
Do you want to have Corbin Burnes, if he develops that pitch, or if he has it already, but if he gets better, how hard would you push that usage, given that he's a workhorse starter? Is there any concern about going to that too much because of fear of injury? I mean, Uncle Ted in the Live Hive suggesting that's just asking for an elbow issue.
I mean, we've seen some different research on this over time. I think direct stress on the elbow is highest with velo. I've seen there was some new research about spin being a problem, but there was actually research at the Sabre seminar that wasn't able to replicate that finding. I think it is a problem if you throw a 92-mile-an-hour slider, and Corbin Burnes is pretty hard. 88 is pretty hard. I wouldn't necessarily push it to 40%. You know, but right now he's throwing what's he throwing? He's throwing 15% because he can't command it. I mean, he could throw more sliders. And Webb could, if I could bequeath Webb a standout, amazing slider that threw 25% of the time, he's already like a top 10 pitcher. I think he would be like one of the best, maybe best pitcher in the league. I mean, you're talking about like one of the best changeup, one of the best sinkers, great command. I mean, if I gave him a plus slider, that's like kind of the Pedro package. Pedro was like, oh, by the way, I have the best curveball, the best changeup, and, you know, one of the two best fastballs in the league. Thank you.
What do you think about the high velo bullet slider that Frederick suggests for Logan
He's been
Webb?
trying it. That was what he did one time. He was talking to me for 1 year. It was all about how hard he could throw a slider. But he just couldn't get it high enough. Like he couldn't throw it hard enough.
Yeah. One thing that I think is being overlooked with him and pretty much nobody else, he throws a four seam sometimes. It's terrible, and he knows that. Logan's a guy who knows. He knows how well what his pitches are based on movement and which ones are the best. The problem is the ones he throws all the time is, you know, when hitters are hitting, they're trying to shrink the strike zone. He already shrinks the strike zone because he throws everything in the bottom half. Like the sinker's like mid thigh, but it's not up. Like they don't have to look up ever with him. He is nothing. It's not about even like standing guys up or changing eye lines. No, he's just eliminated half the zone for them. So like you don't have to worry. That's why he gives up so much contact. That's why his kind of big slider doesn't get chased very much, is because it's just moving exactly. It's moving in the general area eyesight wise for everybody, and they're just like able to make a decision that's going to be way too far out. It's too big in that case. But if you think about it that way, even if you add a smaller one, in reality, it's probably not going to get like less swings on it. They're probably just going to hit it harder. Okay, it's just because it's moving less. That's the reason his changeup and his sinker both move down and away from a lefty a lot. But I
think the cutter could be a good idea, even if it's a 45 cutter, because he could throw it high in the zone, maybe.
Yeah, he needs. Then I think that's what he wants, and that's why he throws it to Ohtani, because Ohtani crushes everything at the bottom of the zone. Like he can't pitch this way to him, which that's a big issue. That's an issue. So he finding something that maybe stays higher, or he can use high, or maybe like a different version of his sinker that doesn't sink as much. That would be interesting to me, like a Bassett sinker who he throws up all the time.
Oh, just like the
Like,
two.
if you
This is the
can't throw a
two-seamer. This is not
Yeah.
the sinker. This is the two-seamer.
If you can't throw a four seam that's it's got 20 inches of drop still, his four seam does. If you can't do that, then throw like something that goes a lot horizontally because you do that so naturally. But
Like the non-seam shifted sinker, like the
Yeah.
non-seam shifted sinker.
mess with that and see what happens, because he already has such good feel for that. So like, work within the things you have, but you need to open up the top part of the zone a little bit somehow, and figure out a way to do that. And maybe that's just a different version of the pitches you already throw.
And Trevor, you might be interested in this. There was a little part of that question was, has there been research into pitch separation, like different? And so
Yes.
one of the things that we saw was somebody looked at the value of, when you see those pitch movement charts on Brooks or whatever, like, those spray charts, that he just described the distance between the pitches, like the area of the blob or whatever, and like the bigger being better. And it was bigger was better. But what he found was, if you have like a tight blob, if you're Graham Ashcraft, and then you throw like a 75 mile an hour curve, right, which is very different than your 98 mile an hour cutter and your 89, 90 mile an hour sweeper, right? Now you throw a 78 mile an hour curve. That pitch, that's the big thing that separates from all the rest. It has fewer swings. It can be good for you, but it has fewer swings. So that says to me, the batter sees it because it's so different than everything else. But if you can command it, so that's what. So it almost, the question to Logan Webb is not how good your cutter is can you just put it there?
Yeah,
because it's going to look so different than everything else that most of the time people are going to see that cutter and be like, "What the hell was that?"
Yeah,
and not swing.
You just want them to have to think about it. Like, if anything, if it just becomes a pitch where they're like, I know that that's something that I might get, that could throw them off everything else, because everything else is in the same kind of bucket. It's Josh Hader changed his slider to be harder and move less, because he's like, the other one, the 82, is just too different.
So different. Yeah.
Guys are just like getting these, like,
and he needs swings because he doesn't have good command. He needs swings. So you can't.
I need swings, and my fastball is my bread and butter anyway. So I need something where they're like, they're going to swing at this, meaning they're thinking about it, meaning that's going to make it my fastball better. And it has, because he's like, but my slider's never going to be my out pitch. It never is. I can't throw a good one. I need one that makes my fastball better. And he made that choice, even though no one really noticed that he needed to do it but him, because it didn't seem like an issue because his fastball is still doing well. But that's kind of the way that you would trade in you would commit to a not as good movement pitch in a vacuum in order to make other pitches better. That's a prime example. And that's what Logan needs.
Yeah.
Well, just dabbling a little bit, maybe.
I mean, he's still a really good pitcher. It's just...
Oh yeah. Well, if the swing and miss is something that he wants to be able to go to in certain situations and not just depend on our defense all the time, because he's given up a lot of hits this year. He'll tell you it's too many hits.
And what we're also saying is he may not get a true whiff pitch, but he may get a called strike pitch that makes his changeup into more of a whiff pitch.
Exactly.
Because now they're like, oh, wow, oh crap, now it's 0-2. Now he throws the changeup that's further off the zone.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot for those questions from Stinky and Michael C in the Discord. Join the Discord. Links in the show description. Ask questions for future episodes. You can always ask during the show. Sometimes we'll get those in as well. Do you guys want to play a Name That Dude before we go? I had one queued up for last week. It's just sitting here.
I'm terrible at this. Yes, let's go.
All right. Trevor has the all-time series lead 1-0. Here's the thing. Eno has to make sure that if he has an idea of the player, he can't sound the player out loud and then have Trevor steal, because that's how Trevor got the win.
I was like, Mesa.
You were giving more clues. You were on it. You had the edge and you gave it up. All right. So name that dude. I was a position player born November 10th, 1986 in San Jose, California. And I made my major league debut on May 18th, 2011. After being drafted in the 7th round out of Pepperdine. Blank stares.
Current?
No longer playing. I played my final MLB game in September of 2020 while appearing for my 4th major league team. I'll continue. Still blank stares. I topped 25 homers in a season twice, including a career high 31 homers in 2017.
I want to say Jason Kipnis.
It's not Jason Kipnis. You want to throw a guess in?
He's a little bit younger than that, I think. Pepperdine.
Not yet.
Looks like a no. Okay. Some refer to me as Song Namja, Others call me Phone Home or Mr. T.
Tulowitzki?
No.
Damn it. He was Long Beach, wasn't he? Frick.
Still nothing there. You want to throw a guess out there?
Mr. T.
38-year-old.
Yeah, Mr. T.
What was
All
the
right,
first one?
Sang Namja. All right, you don't have a guess yet, so we'll keep going. I hit more home runs in the KBO than I did in the majors or across all of my minor league stops.
That did not help me.
What? That should have given it away.
Eric Thames.
Yes, Eric Thames.
That's it, Mr. T.
Mr. T.
God damn.
Trevor takes a 2-0 season lead in Name That Dude.
Not
Not entirely surprised. but
remember
hey, look,
Sang Namja.
Long Namda.
Yeah,
Mr. T should have done it.
I don't remember Sang Namja either, but that was a fun little run for Eric Thames when he came back to the big leagues and was providing all that power after just tearing up the KBO. All right, we are going to go on our way out the door. Reminder, you can find us on Twitter. You can find Trevor at I am Trevor May. Find Eno at Eno Saris. Find me at Derek Van Riper. The pod is at Rates and Barrels. Join that Discord. The link is in the show description. If you got a question for a future episode, you can also email those. ratesandbarrels@gmail.com is the other way to do that. Thanks to Brian Smith for producing this episode. We are back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.